Okay. Now, okay, it's working, but I do need to make an adjustment. There we go. Okay. So let's transition. All right. So yeah, this is Auto Mechanic Simulator 2021 with some additions. Um, Now I've played this through pretty far in. Oh, that's right. I got nothing in here right now. Whoopsie. Anyway, what I want to do is kind of introduce this game simply because, again, I have a background as a mechanic, and just when I first got into this game, I was like, it's a video game, so there are some things that are, you know, kind of, I don't know, they're gamey. But I started thinking about it, it's like, you know, this is a great way to introduce people into auto mechanics because there is quite a bit of, I won't say realism, but there's quite a bit of overlap between being a real mechanic and this game. But it looks like I need to get a car. I swear I had another. I still can't believe there's sprinting in this game, but no stamina. Um, I could have swore I had a car to just junk around. Tells you how much I've done to prepare this. Well, I got that Viper in there, so tell you what, let's pull this guy in. Oh yeah, it's a Viper with a Ford engine. Uh, well, I'll say and I bet this engine probably makes more power than a V10 Viper now. Um, so I wanted to move the car to the first lift. Here we go. So, okay, so first thing you're going to notice is that if I were bringing this car in, I would quickly realize I would need to do something to make put it on the lift a little bit easier. If I were to actually kick this in, this part of the lift would hit the rear tire. So I probably would. What I would probably do is move this in as far in as I could, then kick this in, drive it forward, and then set it up. But unfortunately, as you will see here in a minute, hey, work. Yeah, see it just clips through. It's video game, and it is kind of funny. It just goes to this one level, but whatever. Anyway, um, but yeah, that's not. Ooh, that's the other thing I would try and find a way to get around is lifting the car up so that the side skirt doesn't hit the lift arm. That's no good. That would get complaints from the customer if I was doing this in real life. Um, so yeah, this is probably one I would have to probably put an extension on that little foot there after lifting this car up on probably on a set of ramps of some sort, like race ramps. Put them under each tire and roll up on it because that would be the only real way you could clear this and then be able to put an extension on here. But I think in real life, you would be able to fit that car in a lift. I don't remember the last time I lifted up a Dodge Viper on a two-post lift like this. But anyway, yeah. So obviously, like I said, there's just stuff that kind of gamifies this, but yeah, you wouldn't see what is supposed to be a Dodge Viper with a Ford V8 unless somebody decided to do a custom build. And this one's sitting, well, it's sitting behind the axle still, but it's sitting quite far forward. Anyway, but yeah, let's go into why this is a great introduction to auto mechanics for people who have some interest in it. The first thing, obviously is the lift and the fact that you can now no lift that I've ever worked on works in stages like this, but that's neither here nor there. So now we're in the wheel. Now what I would have here is typically a 3/4 inch or ½ inch impact gun, which is what's making this noise. Work. Okay, I'm trying to remember what the button is. Nope, that's not it. I can't remember what the button is to get into disassemble mode. I thought it was that one. I can't remember the controls. Hang on. What was that? Hang on. What was it? Oh, I can't remember what it is now. But I know you go into here. That's what it is. Now, the impact noise. This is what this is going to sound like. Now, taking off in that pattern you just saw wouldn't be a big deal. But I'll show you what this does in a minute. So now I want to reinstall it. Part mount. Here we go. So we're going to put it on here. Yes. Now, the thing I won't do, as as a former tech and as I was a tech, you don't put the wheels in this pattern. See how it's going one then the other? The real thing you would do is actually go, if you're starting with that bolt at the very top, you would go to you would skip the one it's doing now and go to the next one. And then you would skip the next one to install the wheels like that. So what I'm talking about is called a star pattern, and this is for any vehicle. And by the way, I don't think a Dodge Viper uses wheel bolts. I think it has studs and lug nuts. But again, I believe this is a game that's made by people who are more used to European cars. So the star pattern is I would start here, go down to here, go to here, here, and here. That's the star pattern for a 5-lug. The other problem with this game is, unfortunately, when it comes to wheels and tires, is that every vehicle is a 5-lug. That's not true. The Dodge Viper specifically is a 6-lug, just like a truck. So this is wrong, but again, it's part of that gamification to make it entertaining for everybody. You can't make everything specific, and I think there could potentially be some copyright issues with this one, but they've just recently did the Jeep and Ram DLC, so they should have had the rights to this car. Now, here's another thing. I just was astounded that they have this in the game. So now I would be doing this in real life, obviously, but it's really cool to see this in the game. Now, okay, obviously the clipping isn't good, but the next part that I do wish they would do is make you take the other bead off. Actually, I wish they'd make you use the whole machine itself. So you see this here, that's this is all correct as far as what I remember from mounting wheels in my day. So even this here is correct. This is how you break the bead of the tire from the wheel. The bead is that group of coiling right here that's makes the inside diameter of this tire, and it mounts to the inside lip of that wheel. You have another bead on the other side that mounts to another wheel. If you're not familiar, I have a video on wheels and tires as far as like the parts go and how they work and interact with each other on YouTube. So it might be a good one to look at. But yeah, the first thing you would actually need to do you wouldn't be able to just throw the tire on just like they did here. And like I said, you would have to start. You would actually start by letting the air out of the tire by removing a piece known as a valve core. If you look at your little valve, it's another Schrader valve, and two, there's that little pintle needle that you probably see on the inside with like a little rectangular shape that flanks that needle. That's the core, and you remove that to deflate the tire, and that's the quickest way to do it. You could do it by just airing it down from holding that in somehow, but the fastest way is to remove the valve core. Once you do that, you would then take it over here and use this to break the bead on at least one side, if not both sides. I usually end up having to do both sides because that's just easiest. Sometimes the back bead can be just as stuck as the front bead. But once you break those down, you then bring this arm down like you saw a minute ago. But there's one other thing you would need, and it's known as a tire spoon. You would use that to not only go under the bead, but start it to go on the horn of the tire changer. So as you saw, once you get that started, it pulls the rest of the bead up. Now you would have to also do that on the back side of the wheel and the bead. Now, another thing kind of specific to this kind of wheel, I would probably do what's known as a reverse mount and flip this over and mount the wheel with the face down. Because usually when you have a wheel like this, the wheel well, not this. There's an actual well. Again, I described this in that YouTube video I mentioned. There is a well that's inside of here that allows you to move the tire around for mounting. So let's go ahead and take this off for now. Kind of wish you would let me look at the tire, but yeah, here's some regular tires here. But this is all just flavor. These are here for the game. It doesn't matter. Now, let's go ahead and install the rim on the tire, or tire on the rim. And here, this is kind of correct in that you would have the bead, again, go on the horn, but this time instead of lifting the bead up so it comes off of the wheel, it would actually start seeing the bead under the wheel and mount the tire. And again, you would have to do this for both sides of the tire. The next thing you would do, of course, is then inflate it using an air chuck, which this tire machine doesn't have, but in my shop I probably would have an air chuck there. And then you would fill this tire. First, there should be, and there's not, but there is an air blast setting where you basically punch. As you're trying to inflate, you punch this pedal down, and it sends air on the back side of the bead to try and help seat everything, because sometimes it doesn't work. Other ways you can try and help set the bead as you're trying to fill the tire is to literally put the tire on the ground and kind of squash it down a little bit to get the bead to kind of flare out and seat as you're filling the tire. But once that's done, you can now take this off. And now you go over here to this thing. This is a tire balancer. Now you can see that there's little things in here. These are tire weights. These are the stick-on type. And there's another type, I'm guessing that's what's supposed to be in this box, that clip on to the rim of the wheel. You don't usually see this on aftermarket high-performance wheels. And usually there's two types. There's one made for an aluminum wheel, and there's one made for a steel wheel. And the difference is the little clip on the back side of the weight is tighter and smaller versus the aluminum wheel. But if you have a high performance wheel like we have here, you would use these stick-on weights. Now, let me go ahead and mount this. Now, oops, I don't want to do it yet. Now, on this particular setup, this particular wheel, I could get away with putting weights here and here to balance the tire and the wheel. Because, unfortunately, tires do develop high spots, and that causes vibration. Now, if this was a customer that actually had this as a good-looking performance car, they would not want wheel weights to be shown on this wheel face. So my next way of balancing the wheel is by putting weights all on this inside. And these wheel balancers have the capability of showing you where to place them if you're putting them all on just the inside of the wheel. Though this one's pretty wide, you could probably get away with putting all your wheel weights here on the inside anyway. Another thing you can actually set this up to do is put the wheel weights, even the stick-on weights, where you can't see them, where they're mostly hidden by your wheel spokes. That's not always true, but you can sometimes do that. Now, this wheel balancer game is actually not far off on how you really look for where to mount wheel weights. Now, unfortunately, this is only showing one side. Like I said, kind of makes sense in this case. But yeah, this is not far off from how you would literally use a tire balance machine. You would spin the wheel to this location like I'm doing here, and on the machine on screen, it would show you where to place the weight. So you place the weight here. Okay, now you need to move the wheel again. Place it here. Okay, this one needs 3 weights, so you place it right here. That is not far off from real life. That, again, this is just so interesting as somebody who is a mechanic to see these two machines work like this in a video game. So let's go ahead and put this wheel back on now. Oh yeah, I need to go into, oops, not that one. There we go. Part mount mode. Yes. And again, I'll go in a star pattern on this case. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, that's literally how you would, very close to how you would mount a wheel, mount and balance a wheel and tire in real life. That's, again, for a video game, that's really cool to see that kind of detail. I do like, now, here's something, if you play the original game and you want to try and see the sight for making sure your fuel or your food levels are right, unfortunately, it would not allow you to do this level of freedom that I'm doing right now. See how I can move around? Unfortunately, the unmodded game wouldn't allow this. You were stuck in one spot. Kind of makes sense in real life, but then again, the fill level would probably be somewhere else on this bottle. But yeah, and you see that it says cold fill range. That's real. That's something you would really have to pay attention to as you're trying to fill coolant. As the car heats up, the coolant level in this reservoir would actually drain down and become lower because you're trying to. That's just what's happening. You're starting to use up more of the fluid only because of how water contracts and expands as it heats up and cools down. Same thing here with the power steering fluid. Not all bottles will look like this, but in this game, again, it kind of, for simplicity's sake, it does generalize a lot of these components. But again, yeah, there is a real sight level that you would be looking for on your power steering fluid. Sometimes it is a dipstick. That's what the cap will have. And you see this cap doesn't have that, so this one has a sight glass, and some do. Some power steering fluid reservoirs do have a sight glass. Though nowadays, many power steering systems are not hydraulic like this one is indicating. For this particular year of Viper, I think it does have hydraulic fluid. I don't think it was electronic, so this might be still accurate. And then the blue bottle here, that is windshield fluid. But it's still nice that they do include this in the game. Now this one you won't find a max and minimum. Well, you would find a minimum, but you wouldn't necessarily find a maximum on a washer bottle because it's just washer fluid. It just gets used. So you would just top this up until it's overfilled, basically. And going back to the coolant, now some reservoirs are pressurized, and that's why this reservoir here is actually a pressurized system, because you can tell because of the way that radiator cap is done. It's done like an old radiator cap, I should say. So that spring is a pressure bypass. So if this reservoir starts to get over a certain psi, I think most of them are around 16 psi. Some may be higher than that, some may be lower. But regardless, 16 is about the average. And once that hits, this will lift up and then actually start flowing out of a nipple. In this case, they didn't quite put a nipple there. So what will happen here is coolant will overflow out of the radiator cap in this case. And yeah, I do call it a radiator cap, even though the radiator is over here. But there are many cars where this is now a pressure vessel instead of it just being the radiator. So again, something that's kind of accurate, even on American cars. You used to normally see this on Japanese and primarily on European cars back when I started working on cars. But more and more American cars have gone to the system because it's just a more universal system, I suppose. I would say there's no real right or wrong way to do this. I would say this is mostly out of convenience for this particular car, especially since the radiator looks like it's probably covered up by, well, no, not in this case, but in a lot of cases that radiator is covered up by a valance of some sort. So that would make sense why it would potentially turn the reservoir bottle into a pressure vessel when you're trying to design this car. Brake fluid, same thing. There is a minimum and maximum because as you use your brakes, that changes. So as you put pressure on the brakes, that would start to go down. So you would have to fill this to a maximum line. But of course, you don't want to go too low, which is why there's a minimum line, because there's a decent risk that you could start using too much fluid and eventually start pulling air into the system. That's the biggest risk of a low brake fluid reservoir, is that there is that potential to start introducing some air. But really, the most of that contamination is done when the brakes overheat and it starts boiling this fluid. It's a fluid, so it does, like all fluids, it does have the chance of boiling over. That could not only introduce water into the system, because that does, as it boils, it and then condenses back out, and there could be water in that conversion going from boiling fluid, from not boiling fluid to boiling fluid. So yeah, that's pretty accurate, and you would need to look at that. Again, the good thing about this mod I have, you can kind of move around, but reality, there would be a fluid fill indicator on the side. You can actually see it most of the time. I will say there is some risk that some vehicles don't have that. Now, let's talk about why, and this is accurate, seeing two lines coming out of the brake master cylinder. That's what this is. This is a brake master cylinder. This is a vacuum booster. We're getting that in a second. So it is very common to see OEM cars come with two lines coming out of the brake master cylinder. The reason is this is one of these lines feeds the front brakes, while the other line feeds the rear brakes. And this is a safety thing. Unless you have two master cylinders going to each individual circuit, so one for the front, one for the rear, and you see that in race cars. You will see two brake master cylinders. One feeds the front brakes, one feeds the rear brakes. But if you're doing a single cylinder like you see most cars do, you need a way to ensure that you have brake control if something happens. Let's say the line of the rear brakes gets cut right at the caliper or something. Well, that then makes the rear caliper, a rear brake circuit, it won't work anymore because there's now no way to put pressure onto the rear brakes. So you've lost your rear brakes, but you still have a way to stop because your front brakes can still become pressurized. Now, there is additional risk in this. Unfortunately, as you're trying to use your brakes, if you have that hole or cut line, unfortunately that fluid is going to continue to pour out of wherever that damage is. So there is, again, that risk of using too much brake fluid. So if you do legitimately come into that kind of a situation, try not to stop too often and go very slow. Best case scenario, honestly, is just to call a tow truck. Now this one shows an external fuel filter. That's what this red thing is here. That's a fuel filter. And that's not an uncommon shape and design for a fuel filter, but they come in many shapes, many sizes, many designs. Depends on the needs of the fuel filter and the fuel system. But to see it located back here on the firewall, that's not always accurate. Usually it's somewhere else. It could be in the tank. It could be under the car somewhere. There are many places, and there are times where it is in the engine bay, but that's not always the case. But I'll say this location would make it so easy to do service on because it's just right there. Let's get back to the brakes for a second because I should mention how this works. Now, like I said, this is a vacuum brake booster. So technically, when you're using your brakes, you aren't really using a direct feed. Now, in an emergency situation where the vacuum brake booster fails, yes, it will move enough for you to hit the little actuator that's on the back of this master cylinder. But in reality, there is no direct connection in the sense of a lever, an arm going from your brake pedal straight into the brake master cylinder. The reality is that this arm that's connected to your brake pedal goes into the brake booster and is connected to a diaphragm. When you move that, it uses engine vacuum to make moving this side where there's pressure much easier. Because as you press on this side, you're introducing atmospheric pressure on a side where there's vacuum. So this vacuum system makes it much easier for you to push the brakes. And if you're curious on what that really feels like, push the brakes when the car is off. Unless it has an electronic brake servo, you'll find that pushing the brake pedal becomes very, very difficult. And that's what this vacuum booster does. Like I said, modern cars are starting to come with electronic servos that take the place of this vacuum cylinder or vacuum booster. This goes into the fact that some cars are becoming hybrids, so they need a way to create that boost. So many of them are using a servo over a vacuum, or in the case of something like my Mini Cooper where it's turbocharged, it uses a vacuum pump, and that will actually pull vacuum instead of from the engine. It'll pull vacuum from that pump, so you can get that boost to use your brakes. But again, if this fails, the fail safe is that you can still press the diaphragm enough to push the cylinder on the brake master cylinder. You see this here. This is a relay box. And yes, this is not too far off what fuses and relays really look like. Though in this case, not all relays look like these. Not all fuses look like these. There are actually mega fuses in some cases where they have a large. They're made to take a lot of amperage. Like you see this, it's very rare to see a blade style fuse up to 100 amps, and that's what those numbers are. That's the amount of amps it takes to, or the amount of current, I should say, because electricians will get mad at me. The amount of current this can take before it causes a failure. And inside of these fuses is a little piece of metal that is calibrated to that amperage and will burn out. If you've ever seen a burnt fuse and you look and see this little horseshoe thing on the inside, I can't remember if this will show. Oops. Oops, that's a shopping list. Let's see if it shows that. No, it doesn't. But usually, oops, I just took that out. Let's get back in. Okay. Let's put you back in. Yeah, and even this detail shot. Usually there's, if you look between those two blades there within that purple body is usually more translucent, or it has a sight window in it. Usually it's a translucent plastic. It's not a solid plastic like you see here where you can't see through it. Because inside of there is an indicator of when that fuse blows. Now, that's not necessarily always going to show you when a fuse blows. Sometimes that little horseshoe piece I'm describing doesn't always blow in a way you can see it. So what you can do is you can take a multimeter and put it into continuity mode. When you get a multimeter and you stick the two probes together and it beeps, that's continuity mode. You can use that and put it across these two little small bits of metal here, and that will show you or allow you to see if the fuse is in fact blown. Because sometimes it looks perfect, but suddenly there's no power there. So you can use your multimeter in continuity mode and listen for that beep to see if it's truly blown or not. Now let's put this relay back in. Now, I really wish it would let me have a true 3D view of a relay, but it's not far off from what most common relays would look like. And yes, some of them will have the circuit diagram, and that is the diagram for a relay. If you look, there's many numbers, and most relays are commonized. I can't remember what the term is for that. But you'll find that almost all relays have similar numbering on these tangs, on these blades that are sticking out at the bottom here. But what you're seeing in the circuit, the big box thing that's just above that, looks like a barely of a 2-digit number, has that the box with a little line through it. That's indicating a coil. That coil gets energized between the two leads that are there. If you see there's a second number above that coil, that energizes and will pull the line that says 100 right there. That will pull over and activate the relay, either in a always or constant on or constant off. I think that's how it's termed. I can't remember. Uh, Basically, a relay is a electronic switch. It and if you're familiar with electronics, you'll hear things called MOSFETs. Electro Room just did a video on MOSFETs. Great explanation on how they work. But before MOSFETs, there were relays. That's what this is. So when you energize that coil, that switch flips over and basically puts the circuit on for controlling whatever you need. And it's a great way if you need a low voltage source as a trigger, but are trying to pull a high voltage or high current system. A perfect example of this is is a fuel pump. So the ECU can only put out so much current. It's limited to 3.3 volts, 5 volts of current, what those can pull. It's not enough, but your fuel pump needs a full 12 volts. So in order for your ECU to use that 3.3 or 5 volt trigger, it uses a relay. That relay, when it gets triggered, will then connect its internal switch that's connected to the positive and negative of the fuel pump leads, which needs 12 volts, and will turn it on. Again, that's very basic how I'm describing it, but that's accurate. And again, this being a relay, they call it a Type B, but there is no real types. There are shapes, and some relays are kind of generalized, but as far as how they're describing it, not really. So yeah, now I'm going to go ahead and call this car done. Now let's see if I can find. Let's do a restoration, and maybe we'll make this my Saturday thing to do. Oh, here we go. We'll put you in parking. Okay. Uh-oh. What just happened? Oh, must have just... Huh. Okay, whatever. Let's go find a car at a junkyard now. Whoops. Okay, eventually I'm going to get this right. So... let's see. Junkyard. I don't know if there's other junkyards, but this is the only junkyard that I have. Well, once it was... What the frick? That's new. The game never did that here we go thing. That was weird. Anyway. And that was a jump. What the heck? Anyway. Tell you what, let's make it something kind of fun. Let's make it that typical hot rod story. Huh. So that's a Dodge Ram in this game. Oh. Oh, game, you janky. Anyway, I want to try and find the quintessential... Oh, yeah. Yeah, so one of the mods I have is the next gen cars. You may see a few, which is still kind of fun. Let's see here. Man, this is going to be kind of boring. Just looking around trying to find a junk car that I want to build. That's not a junk car. I don't think I'm lucky today. At least on this side. I wish I could jump that. Yeah, if you've never been to a real junkyard, believe it or not, this is kind of not uncommon. I've been to some junkyards that were like this. That I'll just put it that way. But the cars on the racks like this is different. I don't think I've been to a junkyard with cars on racks like this. All right, let's keep going here. I need to find something. Well, I mean, I can find something somewhere else, but it'd just be nice to find something here at the junkyard. Nope. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh. New Z. Well, newish Z. This is still, yeah, say 370Z. Huh. Well, that's a shame. I was hoping to find something out here. But I will say this game kind of lets you do a little dumpster diving here. And lets you find interesting stuff. Let's see, is there anything I wouldn't mind grabbing? Yeah, because I tell you what, this will allow me to show you something else that this game does that's interesting, but not entirely correct. Yeah, let me grab that. Yeah, definitely let me grab that. Yeah, let's grab that then. Yeah, let's get the CUDA. Okay. Alright, tell you what. Now I need to leave so I can buy these parts. I think it's up. Oh, maybe it's not. Oh, yeah, here we go. Turn the garage. And, yeah, buy parts. Alright. Give it a second. There we go. Oh, wrong thing. Let's go to a barn. Really wish I could close that window, but it's okay. So, hang on, I'm on Alt Tab here for just a second. All right. Yeah, I just want to check the stream real quick, make sure everything's still going good. Looks like everything's going good. Anyway, so yeah, let's go into this barn. I know it's probably asking a lot, but there's plenty of holes in the roof that I don't think I would need a flashlight, but whatever. That's old. Well, that's a generally old F350 steering wheel now. Kind of shows you where this about the time frame this game has kind of put itself. Yeah, let's get that and that. At the very least, I could sell those. Ooh, so let's grab that. Grab that because those are probably cheap. All right. Now the big thing is I'm trying to find Aston Martin. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, well, that's supposed to be a BMW 3 Series. You can tell the grill doesn't quite match, but everything else does. Oh, what is this? Oh, this is a Renault Clio. And as a matter of fact, this is the what's that special one with the rear drive? I think because that's an engine cover. Oh gosh, I don't remember what that one is. Clio V6. I think it's just as simple as it is. Anyway, let's see how much that Aston was. I didn't know you could turn your flashlight off. How much is it? They want 57,866. I can afford that. Put in the garage. Oh, let's see. Ooh, case. Yes, there are. There's. I do have the Ferrari DLC. But I was hoping to find. Probably need that. I probably need that. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. I was actually hoping to find a few parts to restore as part of this little venture I'm doing. Well, parts restored are specific to that Aston. But I don't think... Oh, I might get lucky. Did I check this? No. DBX. No, that's not it. That might be it. We'll see. Alright, I've done all those. Actually, I'll tell you what. Oh, Jaguar engine block. No. I mean, I know it's being kind of goofy on looking for specific stuff. Yeah, what the heck. We'll keep that. Mostly just trying to see. I'm also trying to see if I can get another little loot box that they have here. Ah, VQ. That's for that 370Z. Oh, I forgot they have Mini Coopers in this game. Or I downloaded it. No, I think that's a mod. Sorry. Huh, I have to look for those Mini Coopers then. Alright. I kind of want to take this. Yeah, how much is it? Yeah, I'll get that too. Put that in the garage. Okay, I think that's it. So return to garage. Yep, that's fine. Actually, there's one more spot I went. I shouldn't really be trying to get too many cars. The Aston Martin looks nice. Whoops, wrong thing. Let's go to a car auction. And let's do more salvage cars. Oh, there's a hot rod. I don't want to use that hot rod because I just don't like the looks of it. Let's see. Let's see. Old Supreme. Yes, I also got the old school NASCAR. That one looks nice. Well, it'll probably look nice later on. Let me see if I can find that Mini. That'd be kind of fun to find the Mini. Don't see it yet. Oh, golf. Oh, looks like I'm not going to lucky this time. Okay. Bet you I can find one new. Let's see if I can find one new. I'll get this right eventually. Car salon. All right. How would you love to walk into a dealership and find an old CJ just sitting brand new? Actually, I'm curious to see how much this wants for it. Oh, they only want $64,000 for it, which actually, the more I think about it, that's probably accurate. No. All right. Well, I hope to find a mini, but oh well. Maybe I'll find one next time. All right, let's get this Aston into the garage then. Move. Put you on a lift. And actually, you know what? No, let's move you. Let's move you to So this shows you how long I've been playing the game. If the credits and the level system didn't tell you, yeah, I have everything unlocked. So let's take it to the car wash. And yes, wash the car. Wow, this thing. Usually the barn find vehicles they put them in rougher shape. But this one isn't bad. Again, talking through the game. Let's wash the interior. Honestly, probably not a bad thing to do in real life. You know, when you first get a project car, is just to clean it, because then you kind of see what's really bad. Let you see what potentially where real leaks are at and stuff like that. Now, here's something that's I'm gonna move this car. Keep hitting the wrong button. I'm gonna move this car to not the dyno, the test path. Now, here is something I have never ever seen in my career as a mechanic. This is a literal rolling road. Well, here, I'll show you. I can't remember. Do I have to start this? Oh, okay. Wait, what? Oh, I guess I can't do that. Oh. Yeah, I really can't do much of anything. Okay. I tell you what. I can show you what I'm talking about here. Let's move this one back to lift 1. Okay. Go out here. And let's... Oh, no. I want to move. Oh, I see what's going on. Okay. So technically it's in a parking spot. That's what it is. Okay. Now, I keep hitting the wrong button. All right, let's move you to the rolling road. Okay. Oops. Hate when it does that. Okay. Oh, why is it not here? Where did it go? Did I accidentally send it to the dyno? No. And it's not in the paint booth. Oh boy. What? What's it doing there? Oh, who knows? Move the garage. Hit the wrong button. and go to test path. Oh, I hit parking. I know exactly what it did. Okay. Yes. Okay. So as I was mentioning, and also this sounds really nice and very loud. Wow. Very loud. Um anyhow, this is a literal whirling road that, well, I'll just show you. I've never seen anything like this. So here it tests the brakes, which I have never seen done before. So you pull forward again, and you hold the brake, and now it's going to test the suspension. Other than a NASCAR or race car test facility, I've never seen that. And again, we're going to test the rear suspension. I mean, if this exists in real life, I would love to see it. And yes, that car is very loud. But yeah, apparently, okay, so I could kind of see this working in real life because all you have to do is power these and then test your brakes that way. But then again, you know, no, that wouldn't really work. Then this, I guess that could work if it's. But man, I have never seen anything like that in real life. Now we're into. I've definitely never seen anything like that in real life. Um, so now we can do an alignment on the car, but here's the thing. It shows this little lift that, yeah, you would lift this up to potentially raise each axle end up to make your adjustments. But in reality, you don't really need to do that. There's usually a little plate that sits under each wheel. The rear one can be kind of long just to accommodate multiple wheelbases, but the front has a circular plate. And if you're doing the old school stringing, you can use the little indicators on here. But chief thing you want to make sure of course, is your steering wheel straight first. But let me show you the. So this is again not wrong. Now it is wrong technically in the fact that this is sitting at 0. In reality, you don't necessarily want that because it could, believe it or not, a straight 0 alignment on every wheel could potentially increase wear. So the thing I would say that this is potentially doing is saying that this is 0 from the spec, but in real life, you would want to see those numbers. You want to see something, and usually it isn't by degree. It is by degrees, but there's also you can see it in inches. So it's and what you're doing in this one, and you can see the line kind of moving back and forth there at the very bottom. You're setting, in this case, you're setting the toe. So. And this is where, again, the string setup I'm talking about would come in handy, or would be used, because then you would basically set your front toe based on your rear toe. No, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. You would set your toe with a pair of strings, and you would line up against the body. That's what it is. I'm sorry. I'm thinking wrong. So you would line up against the body and using it as straight as you can get it. And you would measure out the strings and make sure they're straight. But what we're seeing here is toe. So let me show you this positive toe they're showing you here. I would call that toe in. There's not really a negative or positive, but whatever. But what you're looking at here is toe in, and then as we swing this back around, what's showing here as a negative, that is toe out. And it's all based off of how you're looking at the vehicle, like you're looking at here on the screen. So if the front of the tire is pointing more towards the center of the body, that is toe in. Toe out is the opposite, where the front of the tire, as you see it here, is pointing towards the outside of the car. Same thing for rear toe. This is toe. As the front of the tire goes out, that is toe out. As the tire goes more towards the end, the front of the tire goes more towards the inside of the body, that is toe in. But as you can see, it kind of does look a little different between front and rear. Again, it's because you're doing a front tire versus a rear tire. Now, the only things this does not show you is setting up what's known as camber. So looking at the tire from straight ahead, negative camber is when the tops of the tires are pointing in towards the body. And positive camber is when the tops of the tires are pointing out towards the body. Now let's say we're looking at this from that front end perspective. Ignore the generalized car body here, just so I can give you a better indication. If we're looking at this from the front of the car, let's say that we're looking at the headlights in this image. The tire going in like that is negative camber. When you swing it back out, that is positive camber. Setting this will determine how flat your tires are to the road. But here's the thing you have to remember about a tire. It is dynamic. It moves. That even though you may not see your sidewall crumpling in or out as you're making a turn, that tire is moving just enough that a straight up and down camber like this might introduce tire wear. And that is because your car, it's not set up to take that potential of the tire moving as you're driving. Again, your tires, they are rubber. They are dynamic. Any amount of load you put to the tire, doesn't matter how little, will make that tire move. Excuse me. Another thing this doesn't show is a measurement called caster. Now, caster is, for you as a general person, relates to how the wheel will self-center as you're driving. Now, think about as you're driving your car and you make a turn, and then you let the wheel, you gently let go and let the wheel slip in your hands. That is self-centering. That is mostly down to caster. But caster does a little bit more than that. Again, with your tire being rubber and being dynamic, when you add load to it, as you're turning your wheel, depending on which way you go, let's say you're making a left-hand turn, your wheel, due to caster, will not only turn left, but also start to camber. Now, generally, when you make a left-hand turn like that, the left-hand tire will lean to the outside more as you're turning. The right-hand tire will lean towards the center of the body. Think of it like a motorcycle. As you're making your turn, you're leaning. That's essentially what caster is doing to your front tires. The rear tires don't do caster as much. Generally, when it comes to the alignment of your rear tires, it's all by the linkages. Your front tires are a little more dynamic because they have to turn, whereas your rear wheels, they don't typically turn. Now there are four-wheel steering vehicles, so then caster does kind of come a little more into play into them. Not as much as the front end, but it can still happen. And with them, with the rear tires, most of the adjustments you're going to be doing are your toe and your camber. And a lot of that can be determined by the linkages. So as you squat, your tires may lean in and toe in, or could do the opposite. They could do toe out and lean out, or lean in and toe in. Again, it all depends on how the linkages move and their arcs. And again, that's the same thing with the front suspension. Even with the McPherson strut, as the suspension moves, it's doing all kinds of things to your tires. That's why alignment is so critical on making sure that your tires wear like you're supposed to. Because every time you hit a bump, every time you turn, every time you gently turn into a corner, you accelerate, you brake, everything. These wheels are moving. They are dynamic. And that's if you want to talk about, STEM, the perfect thing to teach almost everything in STEM is a car. So much engineering, tons of technology, chemical reactions. This is the thing that makes cars so interesting from a science standpoint, I feel, anyway. I mean, heck, even think about aerodynamics in this, lackluster fake wing. Anyway, let me show you something else that's, again, really coolly included in this game, and something I had to do. Yep, aiming headlights. Now, this is pretty close to how it's done in real life, but you would have a lot more indication than what this is giving you. So the way I've done this is, since this is a left headlight, I would generally try and bring it more to the center here, and have, because this is also not showing if this is high beam or low beam. There's no indication of this. So high beam obviously would turn. It does technically make the light brighter, but it also does one other thing. It actually changes where the light is projecting, either by using an upper filament, or in some cases with like LEDs, turning on extra LEDs. I don't think there's one that actually moves a headlight to do high beams. There used to be, way back in the 20s and 30s, that was how high beam was done. It would literally flip the headlight up. But I would say that's good for that one. This one I'll probably go a little more this way. And I call that done. So again, I would say this is not inaccurate, but because it's not really indicating to me if it's high beam or low beam, it's not super accurate. Though I will say that if you get the beam direction correct on low beam, high beam will follow, because it's all on the same housing usually. And again, with most cars having LED headlights now, aiming is almost non-existent. When you used to replace, like halogen bulbs in some cases, but mostly in the sealed beam era, so old school headlights, you should, if you replace a headlight on those, you should adjust them, because there are general differences within how a sealed beam headlight was made. Not all of them are made the same. They're close, but there's still enough to put in a headlight alignment out of whack. But yeah, this is not too far off, and this is actually how one of these machines would look. The headlight was shine here once you've aligned it correctly, and there are ways to tell you that. And then what this isn't showing is that you would look and that see this here, this pattern here is what you would see up here, or potentially I guess it may have like a little flip screen here, and that would show you the pattern. Oh, to get off on a semi tangent here, going back to alignments. Also, all Alintro. Yeah, that's not a real company. Which clearly there's no real companies in this game unless you mod them in. Anyhow, so this is a laser alignment machine. Ironically, not how the laser alignment pads would look. Basically, there would be reflectors that look like QR codes. They're little panels that have a certain pattern done into them, and they will be mounted to your wheels here. So 2 for the front, 2 for the back. Then this, once you told this computer to say, hey, check my alignment, these would start to flash, and they're infrared. So these little dots here are little infrared LEDs, and these cameras are designed to read the reflection from the little QR code looking thing that would be right here back to these cameras. One would be used to compare the rear, one would be used to compare the front. And these, even back when I was working as a mechanic, so we're talking early 2000s officially, but really I'd started when I was much younger than that. But even these machines were super accurate. You could just bump the tie rod and it would read how much you changed the toe with that little bump. But yeah, that's actually how an alignment machine really looks. And unfortunately, the only part about this game is that it only shows you how to do toe. And even then, I would argue the way it's showing you how to do toe is not correct. But otherwise, I'd call it very close enough to being accurate. Oh, that's something I didn't realize. This has an OBD2 code reader in here for some reason, along with another OBD2 code reader. So that's going to be one for your computer, which you obviously have a laptop here with TPM. That's a callback to IBM, I'm sure. But anyway, or you can have a handheld one like this one. Many modern shops and dealerships are basically, all the diagnostics are now done by a laptop. It's not a handheld reader like this much anymore. I'm guessing these are, well, some of these are patents. Some of these are just, looks like old articles of some sort. You probably wouldn't see that on a real shop post-it board, but you know, you can do what you want. Now, as far as an independent shop, it's kind of rare to see one with a paint booth, but I was mentioning a paint booth earlier during the stream, and you know, this is a paint booth. This is where your car would come in and get painted. Now you see this grid on the floor here. Now, if this is set up correctly, you can see this is kind of foamy, fuzzy looking roof. That's not by accident. This is how a paint booth works. This is known as I think it's called downfire or downwind, something like that. Anyway, air is coming from down up here through these filters and goes down into the floor. The floor then pulls that air out and should go to a system somewhere. Looks like it goes through here. But yeah, that's how air comes in through here and goes down through here. And that helps not only with laying the paint out, but it also helps clear out some of the VOCs and dangerous chemicals. You still, as a painter, will want to wear your PPE or your protective equipment. So like the face mask, a clean suit, I think is what you can call it technically. Another thing, you're seeing these lights set up here and here. Accurate. That's a real thing for a real paint booth. I probably wouldn't see the paint and equipment in here like this. These would probably be outside, and you would bring it in because you don't want paint getting on your stuff here. Now this is probably used to hang doors and other body panels and stuff like that. Same thing with this. But again, I wouldn't see any of this. I have no idea what this is. Master Blast. I no idea. Detailing equipment? No, that would not be in here. This would be anything that's in here. You would want to. You need to be willing to sacrifice to have paint put on them. Obviously, you still want to try and be careful not spraying in this direction if you can help it. But even paint mixing, yeah, you would be doing that in here, just like all of this is showing. That's a spray gun. Again, here's the PPE I was talking about, the mask. This is an air compressor. For this shop, it's tiny. I know it looks massive to you and for anybody that's a home shop, but for even a shop of this size, I would argue this is a small air compressor. You would see one with a much larger tank at the very least. But yeah, that is an air tank. I have no idea where that line is going. But yeah, that's a spray gun. So once you've gotten your paint mix, because you do mix paints, some of the colors you make, you have to add certain amounts of certain colors to create the color you're looking for. So once you've mixed them, you would then pour the paint into this cup here. Usually they don't have it. There's actually a little stand that you would use to hold that up so you can pour the paint in there easily. What else we got here? Yeah, these are paint cans with these little tops on them. Those are for stirring. Some paint racks will actually do mass stirring like this. So you slide the paint can in, it then connects to a little drive that's up here, and then you'll keep these constantly mixed. Because paint has pigment in it, and pigment will flow out and settle to the bottom unless you keep them constantly mixed. You can also looks like it's actually a scale. I can't really zoom in close, but from the looks of it, that looks like to be a scale, and that is a way you can measure your paint out by scaling it. Right, putting empty cup on here, tearing it out, pour your first color into the amount that it says on whatever your paint mix code is. Then grab your next paint, pour in till it hits that number, and so on and so forth. These blue mats, I would imagine, if we're thinking about car stuff, that's probably how you would. These are probably like tire and wheel covers. Spray paint, yeah, you might see that in a shop if you just need to do a small thing or tiny stuff. In reality, probably not. Buffing and detailing, yeah, you would probably see that in a paint shop, but not in where there's paint. These should be up here or up here. This stuff should be separated, honestly. I know some shops don't, but in reality, you should separate it. That just looks like tape, so it's whatever. Let's go back inside because I did show something. Now, if you only needed to, let's say you're doing a two-tone paint job like what this Viper has, you would shoot down your first layer, which in that case would be, I would probably do the blue first, and then to prevent overspray, or even if you're just spraying something and want to prevent overspray in general, you would use this paper with some tape on the end and lay it on the car to cover whatever part you don't want to see overspray, or if you're trying to lay down, say, like a a two-tone body line, a stripe, or whatever. You can do this with this wherever you need to achieve the look or thing you need to achieve. Let's see what else is there in here. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, a lot of a lot of really cool stuff that does accurately portray being an auto mechanic, and it's why I kind of love this game, to be honest. Um, I'll tell you what. Here's something else. This I scrap. Okay. So this has a weird scrap system that allows you to salvage parts. I wouldn't. The way this is doing, I wouldn't see a real shop do this. Basically, it's just a little fun little mini game to get you some bonuses towards improving stuff. See scrap needed. That's what this is for. So you get the way this scrapping game works. Well, let me show you. And again, this is not real. So as you can see, there's 3 bars that you could hit. One gives you 1 piece of scrap currency, I guess. Another will get 2, another will get 3. So, okay, I only got 1 on that one. So I got 2 on that one. And there we go. I got 3 on that one. I got 3 on that one. Good. Oops. And then you can upgrade stuff, apparently, in this game. Well, I say apparently. I've been playing this long enough that I know that it's saying it's improving the quality. That doesn't happen in real life. I don't know what this is trying to insinuate, but this is not something you would do as a mechanic or even as just any type of repair in general. Generally, if you get a part that's basically as good as that part's going to get. I mean, if you're modifying something, maybe, but real life, no. And here's another thing. It's kind of outside the realm of real life, and that's coming in here. There's several things that happen in here. Oh gosh, I can show you something really cool with this. But here, this is allowing you to restore things. Yes and no. I can kind of see this. You know, I could see this by doing something like with this subframe or front suspension cross member, as you're calling it here. It's a subframe. The most I could see with this is blasting it with media, like if you've heard of sandblasting, that's what that means. Maybe straightening something out, which will require a lot of work, or the other things that you would do, you actually do on the lift in this game. So I wouldn't call this accurate, but here's what you're doing. Again, it's another slidey game. So you're aiming for the green, and each time you get more towards improved. So for the game, if you're running low on money and can't buy new parts, for this game, this is a great way of getting parts that you need. So I'm willing to sacrifice this one. Here's what happens when you fail. You trash it. Which, honestly, probably isn't wrong. If you get something wrong on a restoration, yeah, it's pretty much dead. That's not entirely true. You can fix many mistakes. So, yeah. So let's get this one fixed. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm all done. Now over here, they separate it to body parts. So these tables like this one, I think this one too, yeah. But if you go to this, yeah, see, this is a weird bending brake. I have no idea what's going on with those rollers there. This is the English wheel. This you'll see this in restoring shops that do body work. This is made to put. Well, it's done. It does a lot of things. You can put beads and stuff, but the biggest thing for long body parts, like say a fender or a hood, you can use that to make a curve. So if let's say you're trying to build a fender, you can use this. You turn this wheel and it puts pressure on this wheel, and as you pull whatever sheet metal you're pulling through here, it'll take the curve of the die. So turn this, adds more curve, turn this, puts more curve into it, and you're slowly putting a radius on whatever flat piece of sheet metal you're working on in here. Now, I'll be first to admit, I've never actually worked with an English wheel before. I just know this generally. But as far as I know, how I described it is accurate. I'll let somebody comment on that. Well, that's interesting. Looks like somebody's making a die, but yeah, it doesn't make sense. I guess going back to this is a bender. So what you do is you put your flat piece of sheet metal in here, and then you would use these two hooks here to lift this lower jaw up and put a bend into your sheet metal or whatever metal you happen to be working with. What's weirding me out is that this looks like it's trying to be a bead roller, but it's if you pull this up, that's not moving. Yeah, I have no idea what that part is, but this part here, that's a bending brake. So if you put a bend, doesn't matter how much of a bend you may need, but you would use this, and usually there's little teeth, for lack of a better word, but they're little separations, so you can make smaller bends, bigger bends. Like say if you're trying to make the most common thing to see these on, these little teeth things I'm trying to describe, is like you're trying to bend a box. So if you're trying to bend the box, you would have a tooth long enough to make one corner, bring it over here to make the longer corner or longer end of the box, yada yada. But if you're just doing just general flat work, yeah, this would work just fine. And yeah, you can actually home make one of these with just using some angle iron. Lots of tutorials on YouTube on how to do it. It's really simple. I actually need to make one myself. Anyway, let's see. Angle grinder. I don't know how many of you are not familiar with an angle grinder, but it can also be considered the death wheel, because if you use the cutting wheel on it, it's a very thin piece of abrasive material, and if you don't do it right, or you get a really cheap cutting wheel, it can fly apart. There are very massive horror stories with accidents with these things. But if, honestly, 100% truthfully, if you use the tool correctly, it'll never give you trouble, mostly. But yeah, let's go into here. So, again, I would argue that this is probably a little bit much for a general shop like this is supposed to be. But again, it's a game. So, not quite. One more. All right, there we go. So, and that's how you repair body panels. And the funny thing about this game, it includes making repairs to headlights, taillights, window glass, mirror glass. Yeah, things you would have to get new parts for. You couldn't fix them like this does. Anyway, tell you what, let's get back to this guy for real quick, because get this lifted up here. And again, this is going back to this 2-push lift here. This is not inaccurate in how it looks and how it operates to a degree. I guess that's technically on the frame. If this was a unibody car, these feet here would be on the pinch weld or on a subframe member if it has one. Some unibody cars, and I have to figure out a way to explain unibody somehow. Basically, if you see, like, okay, this is a terrible example because an Aston Martin doesn't really have this. I believe they are framed cars, at least the one like what this is supposed to be. But see how this is a frame, the subframe, and it connects to the body. And in some cars, there is another frame back here. Not all, but some. So that's technically what defines what a unibody car is, or a unit body. I've heard it called that too. Basically, the body is the main structure. All of this is all the chassis. So everything you see out here on the door, on the fenders, the pillars here, even the pillars that go across the roof, the entire greenhouse, and everything that's pretty much under here, that would make up the unibody and essentially make your body part of the frame. Where this, unfortunately, you don't see cars made as a entire frame because you would need to attach stuff like the suspension parts. A little bit hard to do that, and especially if you have to remove an engine component or anything like that, you would need access. And unfortunately, if this was a whole unit, if this was connected to the body with no way to remove it, you couldn't really, facilitate proper repairs here. So anyway, I want to show you guys. So let's take this off. And this might be accurate for the Aston Martin, honestly, but I don't know. I don't know this old Aston all that well. Okay, so now let me describe what you're seeing right here. This is, when you hear people talk about your brake system, this is part of what they're talking about. This piece here, this blue colored and rust colored piece, there's a reason why it looks like this, by the way. I'll explain in a second. That is a brake caliper. In this case, I can tell it's a single piston because of this large cylinder back here. I think in reality, it might be single piston, but I would imagine it's more two piston. Performance brakes would have pistons on both sides. You can have a two piston with a piston on each side, but most performance brakes are going to be described as four piston. There'll be two pistons on this side of the rotor and then two pistons on this side of the rotor. You can see six pistons would be 3 and 3, and etc. I think the most I've ever heard of is 12, and it belonged on an SUV with massive rotors. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this caliper off, and it's telling me to remove 2 bolts. That is mostly correct. Okay, this one needs there's a way of spraying. There we go. Not WD-40, by the way. I know it can show WD-40. No, it'd be a rust penetrant of some sort. But yeah, removing 2 bolts to remove the entire caliper like that is accurate. But you wouldn't take the whole bracket off. You would just take the caliper off. There would be 2 bolts, maybe 4, depends on who's made it, but usually it's 2. There would be 2 bolts either coming straight off just like you did here, or they would come from the top. So not entirely accurate, but if you're removing the entire assembly, that would be the caliper and the bracket, that's accurate. Now, the next thing I'm going to be removing are these things here. These are brake pads. If you ever heard anybody talking about your brake pads, that's what you're talking about. These are squeezed onto this rotor, and this is a vented rotor. Just going through some more descriptions here. So these pads, by way of that caliper, are squeezed onto this rotor, and that's how your brakes work to stop the vehicle. In the technical term on how this works, you're creating heat. The friction is transferring the energy that is spinning this rotor into heat and dissipating it out into the atmosphere as heat. So that is the technical and crude scientific explanation on why your brake pads work with your rotors. Now, you just heard me say this is vented. That is a reason for this for being vented. That heat is also transferred into this rotor, so that heat has to be dissipated somehow. What you'll see, won't really see it. Yeah, I can't really see it on this. Maybe I can. No. So this is the rotor hat, and what you'll see on high performance cars is a duct that will go through here and generally aim into that hat. It won't necessarily go onto the caliper. It'll mostly be directed to this hat, because what this rotor is doing as the rotor moves with the wheel, there is a high pressure, low pressure situation. As this rotor moves, it, for lack of a better word, these vanes are slicing the air. Again, that's a crude way of putting it. But once you do that and it moves to the next, let's say, position, well, now that sliced, again, not correct, but the best way I can describe it, sliced air needs something to fill it. So then that means there is a low pressure area right here. Once the air in this pocket here that's created by these vanes, that's higher pressure than the air that's now missing here. So then it gets pulled out and gets vented out the atmosphere. To enhance that, a high performance car will have a duct that takes air from the front bumper or valence or whatever you want to call it, and forces air through the hat here, and then we'll add more pressure to this area, forcing more air out and making cooling much better. So let's take these brake pads off. Yeah, it's easy. Honestly, that's the other thing that's not true to the real life. The brake pads wouldn't hang there. They would still be on the bracket, which is why you don't normally remove the bracket. And let's go ahead and take this rotor off. Now, the cool thing. The thing I never thought a game would ever replicate. This, they're calling it a professional brake station. Cool, whatever. It's a brake lathe. Basically what you do is you install your rotor, and just like this is somewhat correct. It wouldn't do this well, it would do it automatically, but you would start from the center and pull out. That's how I did it anyway. Some go from the outside and go in, but I prefer to go this way. Okay, so if you've ever seen a machining channel, like this old Tony or A-Bomb 79? Sorry, A-Bomb. This is a lathe. This is absolutely what this is. It is a lathe. There's no difference between this and the lathe you see on this old Tony, on A-Bomb. The only difference is this is a specific design lathe. What you have here are a pair of bits. In most cases, they are carbide, tungsten carbide. These will remove material from the rotor faces. So the outside face and the inside face here. These will remove material that gets built up as you use your brakes. Because that's the other thing your brake pads are doing, is that as you push the brake pedal and the pads get pushed into this rotor, not only are you generating friction and heat, the brake pad material will also bed into these rotor faces. Now, if you've ever had a situation where you hit the brake pedal and you feel the shaking in the front end or feel shaking in your steering wheel, that is an indication that some of that pad material has deposited more in more areas than others, resulting in making that brake shake. So that's what this machine does. It's not, when somebody says a rotor is warped, that's not correct. If your rotor is warped, it's trash. It's done. No amount of flattening out will fix a truly warped rotor. What's happening in real life is material from your brake pads have accumulated in certain areas of your rotor and not in others. This removes that buildup and does take some of the rotor face away. There is a limit to how much you can take off, and it's usually written on the, well, not written, but stamped or molded into the rotor. And that'll tell you how far you can take it. Now, another thing you're seeing on this particular gamified brake lathe and brake rotor is this strap that's going along here. You don't have to put this on. It's a Band-Aid for... It's kind of hard to explain why I say this is a Band-Aid, but basically as you're using this carbide and you're cutting across this face, you could run into chatter. Usually the reason that's causing chatter is that there is a certain feed and speed, as you've probably heard from this old Tony or A-Bomb. Most of these brake lathes are not that complicated. They usually only turn at certain speeds. And sometimes, depending on how deep you're cutting a material, you could run into chatter because your feed and speed is either too slow or potentially too high. I've not seen a brake lathe with high-speed steel cutting bits. Usually they're all carbide. And these rotors are usually cast iron. I don't think there is... There may be cast steel. There may be some cast steel rotors, but usually they're cast iron. But yeah, anyway, this band here is an attempt to reduce the chatter that could occur. Again, you shouldn't need it. It's a Band-Aid, but it's there and it does work. So let's take this off. And yeah, just like a real lathe, you see this has granulations on the marking here. Yeah, that's again, that's real, but I don't see... Okay, there it is. So these dials would move these carbide bits in, because you don't always need to take off the same amount on each side. What you'll do is you'll take a roughing pass. So you take that first pass, just touching the rotor, and let the machine work, coming out and putting a face on the rotor. Now, once you do that, you'll then look at the rotor and see if the face is pretty much even. If your first pass is even, you probably didn't do enough. So what you'll then do is cut the surface again. So you'll move the dial in probably another tenth or so. Let it go through again, and then check your face. And you keep doing that until you see a consistent surface on the brake rotor. And that's how that works. You can also do this on drums, and this game actually does allow you to turn drums. It's just that this attachment here would change. Let's see. Can I show that? Let's take you off. Okay, no, they're showing this car with four-wheel disc brakes, which wouldn't be impossible. Or inaccurate, I should say. Crud. I was kind of hoping it would show a drum more I think about it. Anyhow. But, so, wait, do I have a drum in here? No, I don't have a drum. Crud. Oh, fun fact. Kinda. So when I was living in Virginia, and I had a 1996 Nissan 200SX. No, not the 200SX that would be an S13 or S14 or an S12. The 200SX I had was based on the Sentra. So this was a front wheel drive. Mine was a two door. That's what made a 200SX, is a two door. Anyway, I fried the clutch. So I got a new clutch face, or new clutch, clutch. Okay. The friction material for the clutch. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. The disc. The friction disc. Let's call it that way. And I had to get, a new surface or new pressure plate. But my flywheel also had material on it. Just like the brakes, you can deposit too much material and cause chatter in your clutch. That's a thing. We didn't want to buy a new flywheel. When I say we, I mean me and my dad. So I won't recommend that you do this, but if you're in a pinch, you can turn a flywheel on a brake lathe. I have done it. I won't say it's correct, but I've done it, and it works. It actually works really well. Okay, away before I get myself into trouble. Okay. So the other thing, okay, I was mentioned for this game, you'll notice you'll see a lot of rust, a lot of brown. You'll also see it on things that don't normally rust. Like, for example, okay, perfect example. This, well, maybe not this one, but let's say this is aluminum. Even an aluminum wheel in this game would show rust. That's not accurate. The reason it shows rust is to indicate, hey, this has age, this has damage, whatever you want to call it. That is your visual indication in this game to say, hey, this is no good. You need to fix it or replace it. Again, there are many things in this game you can replace. Or not replace, you can fix. So, I guess, are the wheels that bad? Oh, okay, the wheel was that bad. So, oh no, I know why the wheel. I'll show you in here in a minute. So, look again. If you remember, the brake caliper on the front that we took off looked, it looked like this. It was rusty. So let's go over here and cool, fix that. And okay, I'll explain this here in a minute too. So that was the brake pad. That was the brake caliper and the piston. That the piston is what's driving the inside pad against the rotor, and then as it squeezes, it actually will transfer the rotor. It will actually pull the caliper over to engage the outside pad. It sounds complicated. It's really not. Which actually, let's see. I'm trying to think here in a minute. The brake pads. Oh, so this needs to do brake pads. I may have brake pads anyway. Anyway, so just for demonstration, I'm going to mount these parts. So here's the rotor. See, brand new rotor. Even though it's saying it's 100%. Even though I just turned it. Whatever. So here are brake pad. I thought I had new brake pads. Hang on. I have new brake pads. Why are you telling me I need brake pads? Oh, I don't have brake pads. Wait, no, I do. Switch. Here we go. Oh, here we go. Mara was talking about drum brakes. So these are shoes. That's what's doing the friction material. Instead of a brake pad, it's a shoe that pushes out. Drum brake master cylinder, that's what's at the top of these shoes that pushes them out. Here we go. I thought I had brake pads. I'll take 2. Actually, I should take 4, huh? I'll do it later. All right. So let's get back to this installation. Oops. Keep forgetting I gotta do this. put you on. So let's get to the brake pads. Okay, so just to show again, those are brand new brake pads. If we take so again, showing rust in areas that really shouldn't. Look at the brake pad. So that's again indicating that hey, these pads are worn. They don't show skinnier brake pads like it should. Instead, they show rust. So let's get back to this for a second. And let's go ahead and reinstall this caliper. Okay, so first of all, that is the caliper, and it's showing the caliper with the brake caliper bracket. That's what those two big bolts I was describing earlier. If this was more accurate, there would be two bolts above that bar-shaped area right on that one side of the piston. Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe. Anyway, so what we have here, of course, is the caliper, and then they call this a caliper cylinder. No, that's a piston. But you can see if you look at a brake caliper piston in real life, it would technically look like this. Even the smaller ones would look like that. That little rubber space at the end, that's a seal. So as you push your brake pedal down and the fluid flows from the master cylinder to that caliper, it goes into the actual cylinder and onto that brake caliper piston. Again, what they're calling a cylinder. Now, the thing is, it is technically backwards. This one in the game. That seal should actually be closer to what we're looking at as the face. Really, that would be on the inside of the piston. Now, it could be that this is a solid piston, but that would not be accurate. There are not many brake caliper pistons that look like that. Usually you see that they are cut out. Again, that's just to reduce weight. So technically that you should see a bore in the center of this diagram, and that seal will be on the end to allow fluid to push that piston out and onto the pad. So let's put that in. And we'll stop there. So yeah, that again, that indicates you see new refreshed parts look, new, and everything else that has rust needs to be repaired, replaced, or refurbished. I guess you can call it in this case. So yeah, again, I know a lot of this is gamification. Again, the indication of rust, that's an indicator as you as a player. Though unfortunately it's inaccurate. And again, it's kind of one of the limitations of making a game like this. And the other thing is, again, you look at this caliper and you're thinking, oh, and the brake pads especially, every car has these brakes. Every car has these rotors. Every car has a lot of these same suspension parts. It does break out some to some degree, but almost everything looks the same. So again, it is a bit of gamification to make the design easier. Look, this is just floating here, for example. Same thing here. Things are clipping through. It's all part of making this a game. So while it does a lot of things right as far as like an introduction to being an auto mechanic and working as a restoration person, it does a lot of things wrong. And like I said, this rusting is wrong. How this lift worked is wrong. I've never seen a literal rolling road. But again, it's all stuff that needs to be done to make this a compelling game. if you made it too granular, it'd be boring to people. You know, you're asking people to accept this sacrifice to make this game a little more fun, a little more understandable, but still potentially teach a few things that are still somewhat accurate. And that's why, and again, that's why I enjoy this game. There is enough here that makes this game an accurate enough tool to potentially bring people in to the automotive repair industry. Obviously, when they come into real life, things will change. They'll start to see some of the nuances from the game aren't necessarily the same in real life. I mean, just go to any auto parts store and look up how many parts are actually the same. You'll find that unless you're talking about between make and make, like Ford and Ford or Chevy and Chevy, if you go Ford and Chevy, a lot of parts are not the same. There are a few things that are. Some brake pads are. There are general shapes that are acceptable as between makes. Fluids obviously are, something you can do between makes to a degree. Depends on how granular you want to get on that. Some interior parts could technically be exchanged, but that does require some custom work. Tires, obviously, unless you want to absolutely follow the same thing as what the car came with, which isn't a bad idea, but generally speaking, you can, as long as you get the same size and type, you can use any brand tire on your car. Just realize that there may be some drawbacks. Wheels, same thing. If you can get aftermarket wheels, obviously, but you have to be careful that they don't poke out too much and start interfering with body parts. Like in this game, it wouldn't matter because everything clips and nothing really rubs or interferes. But in real life, that wouldn't work. And as far as like tools go, yeah, that's not a bad thing. Oh, here's something that this game does that I've not really seen a mechanic do. So we have this here. Move this over. Now, if you're curious, this is repairing the frame and the body to a degree. Nah, not really. That doesn't really happen. If you have a frame that needs to be repaired, you take it over to the body shop and they have a frame straightener. You can use this to strengthen if you need to, but at that point you may want to consider, okay, what do I need to really replace? But I won't say it's inaccurate, but I won't say that it is accurate. That doesn't happen often. There are some times when it does. I think the Toyota Tacoma recall and pickup recall where there's a rusted frame. If it wasn't too rusty, I think they allowed repair, but I don't recall. And of course, there's always patch panels, but if you're in an auto shop, you're not doing that. You're trying to get a car repaired as fast as possible so you can get maximum payment for that particular workday. And what I mean by that is, say, let's make it simple. Let's say I'm doing an oil change. Oil change, if you're doing it by book time, is what it's called. That's the amount of time that something like Chilton or some other repair standards people have created to say, okay, this takes this amount of time. This is how much you can bill. That's what that is. That's what book time is. That's how a mechanic gets paid typically. Other times they're paid by the hour, so they don't have to go by book time. But as a service writer, I need to know how much to charge a person per the repair, and that's how you do it. You do it by book time. Trying to think what else. But yeah, but as a mechanic, you might be able to knock out that oil change in like 15 minutes. So if you can knock that out, get the next car in, you can do another oil change. You've now done an hour's worth of work in 30 minutes. But it's not always that way. Some say this removing this engine here. Well, book time might say that's, you know, 4 hours, 8 hours, something like that. But in reality, you might not. It might not take that short of time. It might take you an extra hour or two. So you have to find ways to make it up. Sometimes it's with a totally different job. You know. So as a mechanic, that's kind of the name of the game. Now, if you're paid hourly, yeah, cool, whatever. But if you're a mechanic being paid by book time, you're somebody that's trying to maximize time. So, doing this, no, that's going to take too much time. You're welding a frame together, no. You're replacing that frame, or you're getting it straightened. You're sending it to the body shop. Same thing with like coming over here and restoring parts. No. You're replacing parts. Now, in some cases, if you can get away with it and it doesn't take too much time, sure, maybe doing a restoration on a part is not a bad idea. It can save your customer some money, but in the long run, no, you're going to replace parts. You're not going to fix them, unless they can be fixed. Now, if you think you can make enough time by fixing it and then putting it back on the vehicle, and it's practically as good as new or very, very, very close to it, sure, do that. And if you're an enthusiast, you have this in your personal garage, yeah, go ahead, do that. Repair, fix whatever you can. Don't necessarily have to buy new. But if you're a shop mechanic and you're paid on book time, you're replacing parts. You're not repairing parts anymore. And generally, the way a lot of these parts are now, you can't repair them. You have to replace them, especially electronic parts. So, yeah, I am actually want to let time run a little bit longer. But I'll tell you what, let me Alt-Tab here. And transition out so you guys can see me now. And let me go back into the game real quick just so I can exit. Yep. All right. We are back to just finishing up with the camera and seeing my pretty face.